Secretary Blinken, there's been a spate of developments in Gaza that we're hoping you could shed some light for us on. First, Prime Minister Netanyahu has made public pronouncements about a date being set for an offensive in Rafah. Has the U.S. been apprised of such a date? And has it been given word of any accompanying plans by Israel to ensure the safety of civilians there? Second, you mentioned the increase of the number of trucks being permitted into Gaza on a daily basis, but aid agencies, including the UN, are still saying that much less than the minimum amount of aid required is actually getting where it needs to go. So is Israel really doing enough, quickly enough, in order to forestall changes in U.S. policy, as the President and you have made clear? Foreign Secretary Cameron, you've come to Washington from a meeting in Florida with the former president and current presidential candidate, Donald Trump. We understand that aid to Ukraine was a key item on the agenda. First, do you come away from that meeting more or less assured that U.S. aid to Ukraine is forthcoming in the near term? And second, did you achieve any clarity on Mr. Trump's reported plans to bring the war in Ukraine to an end? Specifically, did you receive any assurances that it would not involve territorial concessions by Kyiv? And with your indulgence for both of you, just given the bleak indications out of Cairo today, Rachel Goldberg-Polin, who's the mother of Hirsch, one of the hostages who's been held in Gaza for now more than 6 months, said recently, I feel that all the parties at the table have failed, to include the governments at the table. Do you disagree with her? Thank you.
Olivia, I'm happy to start. Thank you. And thank you for the new iteration of asking questions of each of us and then asking a joint question at the end. It's a new model that I'm sure your colleagues will carry forward as well. On Rafah, no, we do not have a date for any Rafah operation, at least one that's been communicated to us by the Israelis. On the contrary, what we have is an ongoing conversation with Israel about any Rafah operation. The President's been very clear about our concerns, our deep concerns, about Israel's ability to move civilians out of harm's way, to care for them once they're out of harm's way, and to have any kind of major military operation that doesn't do real harm to civilians, to children, to women, to men. We are committed to ensuring that Hamas cannot govern or dictate the future of Gaza or anything else for that matter. But how Israel conducts any further operations in Gaza matters a great deal. And as we've said, we're talking to them about alternative and, in our judgment, effective ways at solving a problem that needs to be solved, but doing it in a way that does not endanger the innocent. Those conversations are ongoing. My expectation is that we'll see Israeli colleagues again next week to pursue that. With regard to the assistance that is getting in, look, we've been, again, very clear starting with the President. We need to see not just the commitments, not just the implementation of the commitments, but actual results, and results that are sustained, and sustained throughout Gaza, not only in the south or in central Gaza. So I mentioned that, yes, yesterday, by our count, more than 400 trucks were cleared, which is double what had been happening heretofore. That's important, but it's just one step, and again, it needs to be sustained. David referred to a number of other steps that Israel has either committed to or has already begun to take, and I mentioned some of them as well. Opening an additional crossing in the north, maximizing the route from Jordan, maximizing what is being screened at Kerem Shalom and at Rafah, fixing the water pipelines in the north, central, and southern Gaza. This is critical. And so important, putting in place a deconfliction mechanism so that humanitarians can go about their work throughout Gaza without fearing for their security and safety, and so that we never see again the horrific loss with the attack on the World Central Kitchen team just a week or so ago. So this is a work very much in progress, and as I say, we will judge it by its results and by whether they're sustained. But the commitments that have been made and the initial steps to implement those commitments are positive, but a lot more needs to happen to make sure that people in Gaza have what they need.
On the issue of my meeting with President Trump, this was entirely in line with precedent of government ministers meeting with opposition politicians in the run-up to elections. I remember when I was Prime Minister meeting Mitt Romney when he was a candidate. I remember Gordon Brown meeting Barack Obama when he was a candidate. I think, Tony, you recently had a meeting with Keir Starmer, the Labour leader, in Munich. So these things are entirely proper. But it was a private meeting, so I haven't really got anything to add to your questions. But we discussed a range of important geopolitical subjects.
And on
on hostages, yes.
Yeah.
I would just say we're doing everything we can to help. There are two British nationals, but others with British connections, so we're doing everything we can. I would just make the point that ultimately the people responsible for holding these hostages are Hamas. They could release the hostages now. I'm not involved in the minutiae of the negotiations, but I know, very big offers have been made by Israel to release loads of prisoners from their prisons in response to hostages being released. And, we need the hostages to come home. We need the aid to get in, and it's Hamas more than anyone else that are standing in the way of that happening.
And I would just add that I know Rachel well. If I were sitting in her shoes, I'd undoubtedly be feeling and saying the same thing, because until the day that Hirsch is home, we will not have succeeded in doing what we're determined to do, which is to bring him and bring all of the hostages back. We have our teams working on this 24/7. We're working, as you know, closely with Qatar, with Egypt, with Israel. Bill Burns has been doing extraordinary work on this. Many of us have been deeply engaged, working with the governments in question. We have an offer that's on the table now to Hamas that is very serious and should be accepted. Hamas could move forward with this immediately and get a ceasefire that would benefit people throughout Gaza, as well as, of course, get the hostages home. I think the fact that it continues to not say yes is a reflection of what it really thinks about the people of Gaza, which is not much at all. It's also extraordinary the extent to which Hamas has been almost erased from this story. As we both said, going back almost to day one, none of what we've seen in Gaza would have happened had Hamas given up the hostages right away, put down its weapons, stopped hiding behind civilians, and surrendered. It has an opportunity now to agree to the proposal on a ceasefire and on hostages. The ball is in Hamas's court. The world is watching to see what it does.
Felicia Schwartz with the Financial Times.
Thank you. Secretary Blinken, are you confident that the talks in Washington on Rafah will happen before Israel does go into Rafah, and that they will follow your advice when doing so? And on assistance, how long does Israel have to sustain the aid that you spoke about or risk consequences? And do you agree with Foreign Secretary Cameron that there needs to be a plan B? And what do you think that should be?
Aid, and how long does it need to be sustained? It needs to be sustained as long as necessary to ensure that the people of Gaza have what they need to get by, and sustained as long as it takes to put in place something more permanent when this conflict comes to an end, that can guarantee that people are getting what they need and begin to rebuild Gaza. So there's no date certain at all. This needs to not only happen, not only need to be sustained, but it just needs to continue as long as it's necessary to provide for people in Gaza. It's as simple and as straightforward as that. And again, with regard to Rafah, I don't want to prejudge any these ongoing talks. And I can tell you that, again, we expect to have a continuation of those talks next week. I don't anticipate any actions being taken before those talks. And for that matter, I don't see anything imminent. But there is a lot of work to be done, and it remains our conviction that major military operations in Rafah would be extremely dangerous for civilians who would be caught in harm's way. That as we share the commitment to dealing with the problem posed by Hamas, we believe there are other effective ways to do it. That's going to be the subject of these ongoing conversations. I don't want to prejudge what the outcome will be.